Socrates, born in Athens around 470 BCE, stands as one of the most influential figures in Western philosophy. Unlike other thinkers of his time, he left no writings of his own. Instead, his legacy survives through the works of his students, most notably Plato and Xenophon, who captured his conversations and ideas. He became known for a distinctive way of questioning, now called the Socratic method, an approach built on dialogue, challenging assumptions, and exposing contradictions to bring people closer to truth. For Socrates, wisdom did not mean having all the answers, but recognizing the limits of one's knowledge. This humility shaped his most famous words: "The unexamined life is not worth living." His philosophy influenced ethics, politics, and education, encouraging people to think critically about justice, virtue, and the responsibilities of citizenship. But his refusal to stop questioning authority brought him into direct conflict with Athenian leaders. In 399 BCE, he was tried for impiety and corrupting the youth, found guilty, and sentenced to death by drinking poison hemlock. Yet his death only magnified his impact. Through the writings of Plato, Socrates' ideas became the foundation of Western philosophy. Today, his legacy lives on in classrooms, debates, and courtrooms, wherever questioning, reasoning, and the pursuit of truth remain central to human progress. Plato, born in Athens around 427 BCE and living until 347 BCE, stands as one of the most enduring figures in philosophy. A student of Socrates and later the teacher of Aristotle, he lived through the upheavals of the Peloponnesian War and the decline of Athenian democracy, experiences that shaped his search for justice, truth, and the ideal order. In his dialogues, most famously The Republic, written around 375 BCE, Plato laid out his vision of a just society ruled by philosopher kings, leaders guided not by wealth or ambition, but by wisdom and virtue. Central to his thought was the theory of forms, the belief that beyond the material world exists a higher realm of perfect, eternal truths. To explain this, he gave us the allegory of the cave, where humanity mistakes shadows for reality until freed to see the light of truth. Plato also founded the Academy around 387 BCE, the first institution of higher learning in the Western world, where he trained generations of thinkers, including Aristotle. He left behind words that still echo today, such as, "Opinion is the medium between knowledge and ignorance," and "The measure of a man is what he does with power." More than 2,000 years after his death, Plato's ideas continue to shape modern education, politics, and philosophy. From universities built on open inquiry to debates about justice and democracy, the world we live in still carries the imprint of his thought. Aristotle was born in 384 BCE in Stagira, a small town in northern Greece. He was a student of Plato for nearly 20 years at the Academy in Athens. He later became the tutor of Alexander the Great before founding his own school, the Lyceum. His life unfolded at the heart of classical Greece's intellectual revolution. Unlike Plato, who emphasized ideal forms, Aristotle focused on studying the world as it is. He developed formal logic, classified plants and animals, and examined politics, ethics, and human behavior through observation and reason. In his Nicomachean Ethics, he described the pursuit of eudaimonia, human flourishing, achieved by practicing virtue and living according to the golden mean, the balance between excess and deficiency. In politics, he analyzed systems of government, laying the foundations for political science. Aristotle is remembered for his vast contributions across philosophy and science, and is credited with shaping the very methods of inquiry we still use today. He is often associated with the saying, "Knowing yourself is the beginning of all wisdom," a reflection of his emphasis on rational self-awareness. More than 2,000 years later, Aristotle's influence is unmistakable. In the logic that underpins modern science, in the study of ethics and politics, and in the enduring search for knowledge guided by reason and balance. His legacy continues to define how we ask questions and how we seek answers. By the way, I'm going to be posting a lot more interesting videos on the channel. I'll greatly appreciate it if you could show support by liking this video and subscribing to the channel. Thank you very much. Confucius was born in 551 BCE in the state of Lu, in today's Shandong province, during the spring and autumn period. a time of deep political unrest and crumbling traditions. Unlike kings or generals, his mission was not conquest, but the restoration of harmony through the power of virtue, respect, and education. At the center of his philosophy stood two pillars: Ren, meaning humaneness and compassion, and Lai, the proper practice of rituals, customs, and respect in human relationships. Confucius taught that rulers must lead by moral example, that society begins with the family, and that genuine authority comes from integrity, not fear. His teachings sought to rebuild order in an era of chaos. Known as the Great Teacher, his words were preserved in the Analects. Among them is the timeless principle: do not do unto others what you would not have them do to you. Another reflection of his journey declares, "At 15, my heart was set on learning. At 30, I stood firm. At 50, I knew the mandate of heaven." Though his ideas were not fully embraced during his lifetime, centuries later, under the Han Dynasty, they became the foundation of China's state ideology. From government to family life, Confucian thought shaped East Asia for over 2,000 years. His influence endures. In classrooms, in leadership ideals, and in cultural traditions across the world, Confucius's call for virtue, respect, and lifelong learning continues to guide humanity. Proof that a voice from 551 BCE still resonates in the modern age. Laozi, the legendary Chinese sage, is believed to have lived in the 6th century BCE during the Zhou dynasty. His name, meaning Old Master, reflects his role as a wise teacher. Tradition holds that he served as an archivist in the Zhou court before withdrawing from society, leaving behind the text that would become the foundation of Taoism. At the heart of his teaching lies the Tao, or the Way, the natural order that underpins all existence. Laozi urged people to live in harmony with this order, emphasizing Wu Wei, often translated as non-action or effortless action. This was not passivity, but the wisdom of aligning with nature's flow instead of forcing control. He taught that true power is found in humility, softness, and balance. Just as water, though yielding, wears down the hardest stone. These teachings were compiled in the Tao Te Ching, a poetic work of around 5,000 characters that remains one of the most influential texts in Chinese thought. It shaped philosophy, governance, and even spiritual practice. Among its most famous lines is the reminder: "The soft overcomes the hard, the gentle overcomes the rigid." His philosophy offered a counterpoint to Confucian order, favoring simplicity and natural harmony over rigid laws and ritual. Laozi's legacy reaches far beyond China. His ideas inspire modern practices of mindfulness, leadership rooted in humility, environmental thought, and even political theories about minimal governance. More than 2,000 years later, his vision of harmony between humanity and nature still speaks to a world in search of balance. Augustine of Hippo was born in 354 in the Roman province of Numidia, North Africa. He lived during the collapse of the Roman Empire, a world of shifting powers and deep uncertainty. Once a young scholar drawn to rhetoric, philosophy, and pleasure, his life changed after a dramatic conversion to Christianity in 386. As Bishop of Hippo, Augustine became one of the most influential thinkers of late antiquity. He taught that true understanding begins with belief, blending classical philosophy with Christian doctrine. His idea of original sin defined humanity as marked by weakness, in need of divine grace. In his great work, The City of God, written after the sack of Rome in 410, he contrasted the earthly city of ambition and violence with the eternal city of God, laying the foundations for medieval theology and Christian political thought. Augustine is remembered for his searing honesty in Confessions, often called the first Western autobiography. In it, he explored his struggles with temptation, doubt, and the restless search for truth. His words, "You have made us for yourself, O Lord, and our hearts are restless until they rest in you," capture his belief in the soul's longing for God. His influence shaped thinkers from Thomas Aquinas to Martin Luther, and his reflections on free will, justice, and morality continue to echo in modern philosophy and theology. Augustine remains a bridge between the classical world and the Christian Middle Ages, a voice across centuries urging humanity to look beyond power and wealth toward the eternal. Avicenna, also known as Ibn Sina, was born in 980 near Bukhara, in present-day Uzbekistan, and died in 1037 in Hamadan, Iran. He became one of the most important figures of the Islamic Golden Age, remembered both as a philosopher and a physician. He drew upon Aristotle and Plato but fused their ideas with Islamic thought, creating a system that explored logic, metaphysics, and the nature of the soul. Avicenna argued that existence and essence were distinct, that knowledge came through reason, and that the soul was independent of the body. His works shaped Islamic philosophy and later guided European thinkers like Thomas Aquinas. Avicenna authored over 400 texts, with two standing out: the Book of Healing, a vast encyclopedia of philosophy and science, and the Canon of Medicine, completed in 1025, which served as the leading medical reference in Europe and the Islamic world for centuries. He is also known for the floating man thought experiment, where a person suspended with no sensory input would still be self-aware. Proof, he argued, of the soul's immaterial nature. Avicenna's legacy endures today. His writings helped lay the groundwork for modern medicine and influenced logic, psychology, and philosophy. By bridging faith and reason, and blending observation with rational thought, he left behind a body of knowledge that continues to shape science and philosophy across cultures. Thomas Aquinas, born in 1225 in Roccasecca, Italy, became one of the defining minds of the Middle Ages. A Dominican friar and theologian, he lived at a time when faith and reason were often seen in conflict. Yet Aquinas devoted his life to proving they could work together. Drawing deeply from Aristotle's philosophy, he argued that human reason is not opposed to faith, but can lead us toward it. His greatest work, the Summa Theologiae, written between 1265 and 1274, attempted to systematize all of Christian theology. In it, he presented his famous 5 ways, logical proofs for the existence of God. These included arguments from motion, causation, contingency, degrees of perfection, and design. For Aquinas, God was not just a matter of belief, but a rational necessity. He is remembered for words attributed to him. To one who has faith, no explanation is necessary. To one without faith, no explanation is possible. His ideas shaped Catholic doctrine, influenced Western legal and moral thought, and developed the concept of natural law, the belief that moral truths can be discovered through human nature and reason. Centuries later, Aquinas' influence endures. His writings remain central to theology and philosophy, and debates on law, ethics, and religion still echo his reasoning. Even now, Thomas Aquinas stands as a bridge between faith and intellect, his legacy continuing to guide the search for truth. Maimonides, also known as Moses ben Maimon, was born on March 30, 1135, in Córdoba, Spain, during the height of Islamic rule in Al-Andalus. Forced to flee with his family after the Almohad conquest in 1148, he lived in Morocco before settling in Egypt, where he became court physician to Sultan Saladin. He died in Fustat, near Cairo on December 13, 1204, and according to tradition, was later buried in Tiberias. Maimonides left a legacy that reshaped both Jewish law and philosophy. His monumental work, the Mishneh Torah, systematized centuries of Jewish law into a single, accessible code that continues to guide Jewish practice. But it was his philosophical masterpiece, the Guide for the Perplexed, written around 1185 to 1190 in Judeo-Arabic, that elevated him into global intellectual history. In it, he sought to reconcile Aristotelian philosophy with Jewish theology, teaching that scripture often spoke in allegories, and that reason was not an enemy of faith, but its partner. His arguments drew from Islamic philosophers like Al-Farabi and Avicenna, and his influence extended far beyond Judaism, shaping medieval Christian thought in figures like Thomas Aquinas. Maimonides taught that the pursuit of knowledge was the highest form of worship, and one of his most enduring lines remains, "Teach your tongue to say, 'I do not know,' and you will progress." His legacy endures not only in rabbinic study, but also in the modern dialogue between science and religion, law and philosophy. From Cairo to Córdoba, from medieval Judaism to Renaissance Europe, Maimonides remains a timeless bridge between faith and reason, a voice reminding us that the search for truth belongs to all of humanity. René Descartes was born in 1596 in La Haye en Touraine, France, today renamed after him simply as Descartes. He lived through a time when old certainties were collapsing and a new scientific world was emerging. His life's mission was to find a foundation for knowledge that could not be shaken. Descartes began with doubt, radical, relentless doubt. He questioned the senses, the external world, and even the existence of his own body. And yet, one truth remained: if he doubted, he was thinking, and if he was thinking, he existed. From this came his immortal phrase, cogito, ergo sum. I think, therefore I am. From this foundation, Descartes built a new vision of philosophy. He argued that the mind and body were distinct substances, what we call Cartesian dualism. This separation of thought from matter reshaped debates in metaphysics, theology, and science. He was not only a philosopher but also a mathematician and scientist. By uniting algebra with geometry, he created analytic geometry, the Cartesian coordinate system still used in physics, engineering, and computer science. His meditations on first philosophy and principles of philosophy laid the groundwork for Enlightenment thought and the scientific revolution that followed. Descartes died in 1650 in Stockholm, but his influence endures. The scientific method of careful doubt, the mathematical tools that define modern science, and the mind-body problem at the heart of psychology and neuroscience all bear his mark. By daring to doubt everything, Descartes gave the modern world a new way to search for truth, one that still guides philosophy and science today. Baruch Spinoza, born in Amsterdam in 1632, was a Dutch philosopher of Portuguese Jewish descent, whose radical ideas forever changed the way we think about God, nature, and human freedom. In a Europe still dominated by religious authority, Spinoza dared to argue that God was not a distant being, but identical with nature itself, a concept he described as Deus sive natura. His most important work, Ethics, published after his death in 1677, laid out a vision of the universe as one single substance governed by necessity, not divine miracles or human free will. For Spinoza, true freedom came not from resisting the natural order, but from understanding it through reason. He believed knowledge, not superstition, led to peace of mind. Spinoza's radical thinking made him dangerous in the eyes of his community. In 1656, at only 23, he was excommunicated from the Jewish community of Amsterdam for heresy. Yet he continued to write, producing works like the Tractatus Theologico-Politicus, which defended freedom of thought and called for the separation of religion from politics. These bold ideas became pillars of the Enlightenment. He is remembered for lines such as, "Blessedness is nothing else but the contentment of spirit, which arises from the intuitive knowledge of God." Centuries later, Albert Einstein would echo Spinoza's vision, saying he believed in Spinoza's God, who reveals himself in the harmony of all that exists. Spinoza's influence can be seen in secular democracy, constitutional freedoms, and the scientific worldview. Though he died in The Hague in 1677, Spinoza endures as a thinker who showed that reason and freedom could illuminate the path to human flourishing. John Locke was born in 1632 in Rington, England, and lived until 1704. He rose to prominence during the Enlightenment, a period of political unrest and scientific discovery. Today, he is remembered as the father of liberalism, a thinker who reshaped ideas about knowledge, freedom, and government. Locke's philosophy began with a radical claim that the mind is a tabula rasa, or blank slate at birth. In his essay concerning human understanding, published in 1690, he argued that all knowledge comes from experience through sensation and reflection, rejecting the notion of innate ideas. This emphasis on observation and reason marked a decisive turn toward modern empiricism. But Locke's impact went beyond philosophy into politics. In his two treatises of government, also published in 1689, he declared that legitimate governments rest on the consent of the governed. Every individual, he argued, possesses natural rights, life, liberty, and property, that no ruler has the authority to violate. If those rights are trampled, the people have the right to resist and even replace their rulers. Locke's words still resonate today. His assertion, "Where there is no law, there is no freedom," revealed his belief that laws exist to protect liberty, not destroy it. These principles crossed the Atlantic, inspiring figures like Thomas Jefferson, who drew heavily from Locke when drafting the Declaration of Independence in 1776. From his writings on human understanding to his vision of government by consent, John Locke's legacy endures in modern democracy, human rights, and the belief that freedom begins not with kings, but with the people themselves. David Hume, born in Edinburgh in 1711 and living until 1776, became one of the central figures of the Scottish Enlightenment. A philosopher and historian, his ideas reshaped how the modern world understands reason, morality, and knowledge. Hume argued that all human knowledge comes from experience. He denied the existence of innate ideas and emphasized that our understanding is built through impressions and repeated observation. In his major work, A Treatise of Human Nature, published in 1739, he declared, "Reason is, and ought only to be, the slave of the passions," insisting that emotion, not cold logic, drives human action. He also challenged the certainty of cause and effect, noting that we never directly observe causation, only the sequence of events. This skepticism deeply influenced later thinkers, forcing philosophers like Immanuel Kant to rethink the limits of reason and science. Beyond philosophy, Hume's essays on politics and economics shaped modern thought, inspiring Adam Smith and leaving a lasting mark on the foundations of economic theory. Hume's legacy lives on in psychology, where his insights anticipate studies of human behavior, in science, with its reliance on careful observation, and in modern skepticism, which demands evidence before belief. His work remains a reminder that progress often begins not with certainty, but with doubt. Immanuel Kant was born on April 22, 1724, in Königsberg, Prussia, and spent his entire life there. Though he lived quietly as a professor, his writings reshaped philosophy forever. In 1781, he published The Critique of Pure Reason, where he argued that knowledge is not just received from the outside world, but also shaped by the mind's structures. We can never know things in themselves, he claimed, only the world as it appears to us. This groundbreaking idea created a new framework for metaphysics and science. Kant also revolutionized ethics. In his groundwork of the Metaphysics of Morals in 1785, he introduced the categorical imperative. Act only according to that maxim whereby you can, at the same time, will that it should become a universal law. For Kant, morality was rooted not in consequences, but in duty and universal principles. His influence rippled through philosophy, politics, and law. Thinkers like Hegel, Schopenhauer, and modern human rights theorists built on his ideas. His vision of moral autonomy and human dignity underpins democratic societies, justice systems, and global debates on ethics. Kant's life ended in 1804, but the questions he raised about knowledge, morality, and human freedom remain at the center of philosophy and modern thought. Jean-Jacques Rousseau, born in Geneva in 1712 and passing in 1778 in France, became one of the most radical voices of the Enlightenment. He lived in an age dominated by monarchies and rigid hierarchies, yet he dared to imagine a society built on equality and collective freedom. Rousseau believed that human beings were born good but were corrupted by the structures of civilization. In his discourse on inequality of 1755, he claimed that private property was the root of social division. In the Social Contract of 1762, he declared, "Man is born free, and everywhere he is in chains." Here, he argued that true political authority rests not with kings, but with the people themselves, united under the general will. These words would echo through the French Revolution and later inspire democratic movements worldwide. His influence extended beyond politics. In his educational treatise, Émile, also published in 1762, Rousseau rejected rigid classroom instruction and insisted that children should learn through experience, a vision that reshaped modern education. His writings even reached into literature, with Julie, or The New Heloise, stirring a wave of romanticism, while his autobiography, Confessions, laid the foundation for modern self-exploration in writing. Rousseau's legacy remains woven into democracy, education, and debates over equality. His challenge endures: if humans are born free, How can we create societies that truly protect that freedom? Georg Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel, born in Stuttgart in 1770 and passing in Berlin in 1831, stands as one of the most ambitious thinkers of German philosophy. He lived through the French Revolution and the Napoleonic era, moments that deeply shaped his vision of history and human freedom. Hegel's philosophy was built on the idea that history itself is rational, moving forward through conflict and resolution. His method, the dialectic, described how opposing ideas, a thesis and an antithesis, collide and give rise to a higher truth, a synthesis. In works like Phenomenology of Spirit, published in 1807, he explored the development of human consciousness, while his philosophy of right in 1821 laid out how true freedom emerges through family, civil society, and the state. He is remembered for declaring, "The real is rational, and the rational is real." Hegel's influence stretched far beyond his lifetime, shaping the foundations of Marxist thought, inspiring existentialists like Kierkegaard, and echoing through modern political and cultural theory. Karl Marx was born in 1818 in Trier, then part of Prussia, and died in 1883 in London. He lived during the upheavals of the Industrial Revolution, when factories expanded, wealth concentrated in the hands of a few, and millions of workers endured harsh conditions. From this world, Marx developed a philosophy that would shape politics, economics, and society for generations. At the center of his thought was the idea that history is driven by class struggle, the constant conflict between those who own the means of production and those who labor for them. In 1848, together with Friedrich Engels, Marx published the Communist Manifesto, declaring that the history of all hitherto existing society is the history of class struggles. He believed that capitalism, with its relentless pursuit of profit, carried the seeds of its own downfall, eventually giving rise to a classless society. Marx's major work, Das Kapital, first published in 1867, analyzed the inner workings of capitalism, exposing how profit depends on the exploitation of labor. He wrote, "Workers of the world, unite. You have nothing to lose but your chains." These words became a rallying cry, sparking revolutions, inspiring trade unions, and shaping socialist and communist movements worldwide. His influence is visible in debates about inequality, the power of corporations, and the rights of workers. Whether embraced or rejected, Karl Marx remains one of the most transformative thinkers in history, his ideas continuing to challenge how we see society, power, and justice. Friedrich Nietzsche, born on October 15, 1844, in Rücken, Prussia, was a philosopher who questioned the deepest foundations of Western thought. Trained as a classical philologist, he became a professor at the University of Basel at just 24, before dedicating his life to philosophy. Nietzsche's central message was a bold challenge. God is dead. For him, this was not a celebration but a warning. The decline of religion left humanity facing a crisis of meaning. He argued that we must create our own values, free from inherited dogmas, through strength, creativity, and the courage to embrace life fully. His idea of the Übermensch, or Overman, symbolized this new human who defines meaning on their own terms. He is remembered for powerful aphorisms such as, "He who has a why to live can bear almost any how." His writings dissected herd mentality, criticized conventional morality, and pushed readers to confront nihilism directly. These ideas influenced existentialism, postmodern thought, psychology, literature, and even modern critiques of mass culture. By the time of his death on August 25, 1900 in Weimar, Nietzsche's works had already begun reshaping intellectual history. John Stuart Mill was born on May 20, 1806 in London, England. Trained rigorously by his father, James Mill, and influenced by the utilitarian philosopher Jeremy Bentham, Mill rose to become one of the 19th century's most influential voices for liberty and reform. At the heart of his thought was utilitarianism, the belief that actions are right if they promote happiness and wrong if they produce the opposite. But Mill refined this idea, insisting that not all pleasures are equal. He argued that intellectual and moral growth carried higher value than mere physical satisfaction, famously writing that it is better to be a human being dissatisfied than a pig satisfied. Better to be Socrates dissatisfied than a fool satisfied. In his groundbreaking work on liberty of 1859, Mill defended the freedom of thought and speech, introducing the principle that power should only be exercised over an individual to prevent harm to others. He warned against the tyranny of the majority, insisting that progress depends on protecting dissenting voices. Mill also became a leading advocate for women's rights. In The Subjection of Women of 1869, he denounced the legal subordination of women as one of the chief obstacles to human improvement. During his service as a member of Parliament from 1865 to 1868, he became the first MP to demand votes for women, an idea that was revolutionary for his time. Mill's ideas echo in modern democracies, shaping debates on free speech, civil rights, and gender equality. His philosophy of liberty and equality remains a cornerstone of liberal thought, reminding us that true progress comes only when individuals are free to think, speak, and live without unjust restraint. Ludwig Wittgenstein, born in Vienna in 1889 and later teaching at Cambridge, became one of the most influential philosophers of the 20th century. His life was divided between moments of war and intellectual discovery. During World War I, he served in the Austro-Hungarian army, and out of that experience emerged his first great work, the Tractatus Logico-Philosophicus, published in 1921. In the Tractatus, Wittgenstein argued that language works like a mirror of reality. He claimed that propositions represent facts as pictures, and that philosophy's role is not to explain the world, but to clarify how language operates. The book ends with his most famous line, "Whereof one cannot speak, thereof one must be silent." With this, Wittgenstein drew a strict boundary between what can be said meaningfully and what lies beyond language. Yet in his later years, he came to reject this rigid view. In his posthumously published Philosophical Investigations of 1953, Wittgenstein described language as a series of language games, where meaning depends not on fixed definitions, but on how words are used in everyday life. From commands and jokes to prayers and questions, each form of language followed its own rules. He insisted that meaning is found in use, not in abstract essence. This shift reshaped philosophy, influencing linguistics, law, psychology, and even cognitive science. Concepts such as family resemblance and language games remain central in understanding how humans communicate. If you enjoyed this video, I'm going to be posting a lot more interesting videos on the channel. I'd greatly appreciate it if you could like and subscribe. Thank you very much.